Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Mic in our Music Town studios here on the second floor of Hockey Town in downtown Detroit. Thanks for tuning in. I have another guest in here. Well, I have a guest every time. I don't think I've ever not had a guest. So this time around, welcome Robert Crenshaw. Hi, Robert.
Hey, how you doing, Pam? Nice to see you.
Great. I know, it's been a long time.
Yeah. That's been a while.
Since I've had you on a couple other shows. It's 10 or some years, so...
I thought I was more like a contestant on a show, on a game show, but I guess this is, a host. You're the host of a radio show, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. I mean, we are going to play a game later on.
Yeah, that's good.
I guess it could be qualify as that a little bit. So, but thanks for coming in. Appreciate that. And a lot has changed since we've last spoke and had you on the air with me. So, we're going to delve into your brand new book. This is called My Mythological Narrative: A Rock Odyssey, by Robert Crenshaw. And when did this come out?
It came out in August,
Okay.
I believe, late July or August. So
Okay.
It hasn't been out for very long.
Yeah, very, very new.
Yeah.
Hot off the presses.
That's right, hot off the presses. Yeah.
I love this picture. Of course, this one's you.
Yeah.
In the purple hair.
Well, there's a story behind that photograph.
Okay.
And that there used to be a magazine called Music Bill, or Rock Bill, rather. I'm sorry.
Rock Bill, okay.
And Rock Bill was published by the people who ran MTV. So every week they would have a Rock Bill, and you'd probably get it in bars and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a picture that was the cover of Rock Bill. Early on, when we had just done a video and stuff, and we got interviewed by them and all that. But I was looking for a picture of the three of us, because this was the first incarnation of the band, and I thought, well, how I got Marshall in the middle. How do I make me be the focal point of the picture? So I thought, I'll be the only one in color.
That's when I first saw it, I didn't get it, but then it clicks. Like, oh, okay, Robert, he wrote the book.
Yeah.
And obviously you can see by, this is an older picture. And of course, Marshall, your brother, Marshall Crenshaw.
Right.
And then this is
Chris Donato was the bass player, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, no, I loved it. I love it. At first it didn't click, but then I started reading and I went back. It's like, oh, yeah, this is them.
Yeah, that picture was taken in L.A., and I can't remember the name of his name. Anyway, he was a Detroit photographer. So we had stayed up, all night. We had played at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles or something. And then we had this photo shoot. And I can guarantee you that the three faces that you see in that picture are running off zero sleep. We stayed up all night, and it's like, oh, we got to do a photo shoot,
Yeah.
But anyway, so
that was
fun.
That kind of, throughout the book, that's kind of, you were just running on empty sometimes.
Yeah,
through a
that's
lot
right.
of stuff here. I'm just going to look for you, just for the front cover photo by Robert Mathau.
That's right.
Yeah,
and he was a Detroit photographer, and he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so. And as people know, the name Crenshaw, of course, the band you're talking about with the three guys here was Marshall Crenshaw, your brother, who really hit it big, internationally.
Yep, that's right.
And you were the drummer for them.
I was a drummer for the first 4 albums on Warner Brothers, and it was pretty much over about a 8-year period of time. Okay. But, well, actually, before we got signed, so probably more closer to 10 years.
Right.
But it was really, just a miraculous kind of ride that I got to go on. And when I look back on it now, I just kind of scratch my head and I say, well, wait a minute, did that really happen, And every once in a while I get a check in the mail and I'll say, oh yeah, that really did happen, Or there's a lot, of course, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. But, I grew up in Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I went to Berkeley High School, class of 1976. So, I mean, all of the things that happened were kind of beyond my expectations, of my life. I mean, they were my aspirations, for sure. But, just looking back, I just think, wow, that was pretty miraculous,
Which is really cool, from reading this. It's, first of all, if you're a nerd. Well, you use the term many times in
That's
here.
right.
If you're a music nerd, I mean, because you go into, like, we use this blah, blah, blah amp and this, guitar, whatever. And it's like, and some of that was like a little over my head, but someone in music certainly will appreciate, especially the older pieces that you guys recorded on and everything. It was really kind of cool. I didn't know what they were and exactly what they did, but you explained some of those things in here too, which made it a little more interesting, on that end of it. But you really got into the what it was like for a touring band. It was so, most people have no clue of what that is all about. And the stories you got in here really shed the light on a lot of that. It was really, really interesting. And some funny stuff. I cracked myself up a couple times out loud laughing. It's like no one else around, but it was funny. You got a great sense of humor as well, and you put this into your writing. So I love that.
Well, thank you. I really tried to be, honest about it. And, looking back, at my age, I'm 61, right? So if I'm looking back and examining my 22-year-old self or my 24-year-old self or something, I guess, there's enough time has passed where I can be objective and say, what was I thinking? Kind of thing. So, I try to be honest about it. And I guess, enough time has passed that I can be reflective and, and honest about it.
Yeah.
Because you think, that you're like the greatest thing in the world, when all these things are happening, But anyway, when I forgot what I was going to say, but I thought when I first started writing the book, I thought about all of the people that I know who are musicians and that I grew up with, because when like the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan's show, I think that everybody around my age or within a 5-year range of that all wanted to be in the Beatles. They looked like they were having so much fun.
Right.
That's got to be the best job in the world is to be a rock musician. But I know lots and lots of people who went on very similar rides as I did to varying degrees of success. Some of them really more successful than we ever were, and then people who were just as talented as we were, but just didn't get the breaks that we did. So I figured that there was a lot of people nationally and internationally who had gone on the same kind of a ride, who would be able to relate to the story.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And definitely people have experienced, musicians will have read some of these things and go, oh yeah, I remember doing that kind of stuff. For sure. But like I said, the other side is people that don't have that experience. It's really cool to get a backdoor access to those things, which is really, really cool that you put it into a book. So, and you guys had a lot of fun.
We did have a lot of fun, and I think that access is definitely the right word, because I never thought that like we were on the David Letterman show, right? So here I am behind the stage, like in the green room, of NBC Studios. And and we're hanging out and just milling around, and it's like I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen, or like the Merv Griffin show or Solid Gold or any of those shows that we're on. We did them all, American Bandstand, same kind of thing. So just going and seeing like the soft underbelly of those sets and stuff. It's just really kind of miraculous that it happened, but also I'm just so thankful that it happened also.
Yeah, great experiences, and then you go to put it in a book, which the question of course is, why did you decide to write a book and put all these things down? Was there something that inspired that?
I went back to school pretty late in life. In my late 30s, I decided, I should probably get at least one college degree, right? So I went back to school, and I had to take writing classes. Well, if there wasn't something specific that they want me to write, then I would just write what I knew, right? So that stuff, came out, and usually I would post it on Facebook, and people always liked it, what I found is that the truth was stranger than any fiction that I could have ever made up, the stories and stuff. So people really enjoyed it, and I got a lot of positive feedback. And after a while, I kind of had enough, and I needed a project. That was the other thing, because I travel a lot for work, and I'm in hotel rooms. And so, I need something productive and creative, to do with my time. I like TV, and everything, but I kind of wanted something bigger than that. So I just said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a book. So I worked out an outline. Another big part of this, and I will tell you this, is that when I was going to school as a kid, I had horrible dyslexia, and I was a terrible, terrible student. Now, when I went back and I decided that I need to go to college, well, apparently those things had worked themselves out. But my mother was a high school English teacher. She taught at Seaholm and Birmingham schools for like 30 years, right? So when I was going to school and writing and everything, you know, she really helped me with a lot. So as soon as I started writing this book, it was like, Mom, I got a project for us, you know? So it's like, I could send it to her. She could help me, you know, get everything together. You know, I had about 5 people help me with the editing on it. But she was probably the principal one.
Well, an English teacher, come on.
Yeah. So the other part of it is that I wanted to write a book, but even more than a book, I wanted to make an audio book. I was doing some work for the Carpenters and Millwrights Union as a teacher and also as a writer, and they had asked me to produce some instructional videos. So I did, and I ended up doing the voiceovers on them. And I realized, you know, I can do this. You know, I have the technology, and I just have to relax and just, you know, write, and then, you know, just read the thing well enough, you know, and read it enough times until I can do it.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun writing the music. I carried around a little studio, you know, on a computer with, you know, software and a little MIDI keyboard. I wrote a ton of background music. Also, I asked other people to help me and contribute stories, and then I got them to read those stories, you know, live, you know, sending me recordings of them, you know. So so in the audiobook, it's not just me; it's 6, 7 other people.
Oh, nice.
And I was able to hire this friend of mine, Don Dixon, as a producer. And Dixon produced stuff by he's by R.E.M. and Susan Vega and his wife Marty Jones and a bunch of records, you know, I mean, a ton of stuff. And so he also has a theater background, so it was a really nice fit to have someone to, you know, bounce the stuff off once I did it, you know, to help me mix it. So anyway, you know, like the best things that you do are you don't really do them by yourself. You know, you draw on the people that you need, and you work together as a team, and you know, build the thing, right?
Yeah. Well, good for you. I mean, it's really it's a great read. I enjoyed it. You know, and tons of pictures. You've got so many pictures in here of, you know, all the people that you've worked with and, you know, and met and stuff. And so it really, you know, breaks up the text, and you can look at these different studios, everything. I mean, some great pictures in here as well. So that really makes it nice. And you're talking about a specific thing, and then there's a picture to go along with it. You know, that always adds to it.
Absolutely makes it, you know, easier to understand. And also I used to carry a 35 millimeter camera, you know, with me when I was on the road. So there's a lot of, you know, I've got some backstage shots, you know, and stuff with. We did a lot of dates with Hall & Oates, so I have a lot of stuff, you know, backstage shots, side of the stage, the guys in the band, you know, all that, you know, and then, you know, just pictures in general. Yeah, I had a lot of them, and they seemed to fit in there nicely.
Yeah, they did. So so speaking of Hall & Oates, you guys, you toured with Hall & Oates, Joe Jackson, the Beach Boys. Who am I missing here? I'm sure I wrote this down somewhere. There's several other ones here.
Tina Turner,
Tina
we did a
Turner,
bunch of
yes.
shows with.
Dave Edmunds.
Yeah, did a lot of stuff with Dave Edmunds.
Just the fact, I mean, those are all huge names.
You know,
you guys were, you know, just living it up. I mean, just to say you know, were on stage and you opened up for these guys or toured with these guys is huge.
It was pretty good. I mean, you know, that's another thing about the access thing. It's like, okay, well, you know, when you go to Pine Knob and you're on the audience, it's really great. Side of the stage is pretty great, you know, too.
Yeah.
You know, that view is nice on a beautiful summer night. And then also, we did a lot of, you know, outdoor venues like Pine Knobs, you know, in the rock, you know, world, like, you know, there's sheds, right? So you have like Merriweather Post Pavilion and the Greek Theater and Saratoga Performing Arts Center, and well, it used to be Pine Knob, and now it's, you know, DTE, but there's a bunch of those all around the you know, around the country. And I don't know if we did all of them, but I mean, we did a lot of them. So it's like you're at a concert every single night. And some of those bands, I mean, they were so great and so much, you know, fun to watch and everything that, I mean, I watched their show every single night, you know. So going to a good show every night and getting paid to do it.
Do you think you picked up a lot of, little tips and tricks for your own craft, do you think, watching all these bands?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really ever thinking about it in that way. I probably should have. But, I was just kind of,
You were having fun enjoying a concert, right?
A fan, exactly, So, yeah, I probably should have spent more time, studying the pros, but, But anyway, yeah, I was more just a casual, or not a casual observer, but just an observer.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're backstage enjoying it. You're going to a concert pretty much, right up close.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, well. How about we hear a song?
Okay. Well, this anyway, it was the first single off the first record.
Okay.
It goes like this.
Boy, that brings back some good memories. Good drumming on there, Robert. Good drumming.
Hey, well, thank you. I was thinking about this record. I mean, about making this record, and was thinking that we went into this place called the Record Plant, in New York. Well, you walk into the waiting room and there's a ton of gold records on the wall, right? But it's like there's Jimi Hendrix records and there's 4 John Lennon records, and there's Frampton Comes Alive and the Concert for Bangladesh and all of these things, right? And iconic things, that from in my life anyway.
Right.
And so this is where you're going to make your record, son, right? So we're in the studio with this guy named Richard Goddard. And Richard Goddard was in a band in the 60s called the Strangelove. So they had this record called I Want Candy. Mm-hmm. But he did a whole bunch of stuff with girl groups, in the 1960s and, produced a ton of records. But he had just produced the Go-Go's first album, Beauty and the Beat. And when we were in there, the record was #1 in the studio. I mean, I'm sorry, it was #1 on Billboard charts, right?
Okay, yeah.
So it was like when that happened, it seemed like a lot of things were possible. You're working in this environment with this, with these people, with this really, the A team, the other guys, in the band and on the crew. This other guy, Tom Panunzi, was one of the engineers. I mean, he worked with Springsteen, he worked with Lennon, he worked with Blondie, just a ton of people. So it was like to be in that environment with that level of a success. I mean, really, it did feel like anything was possible.
Well, good vibes in that building for sure.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very cool.
Big fun.
That when you go into a studio like that and you see these gold records all over, and I'm sure it's a long hallway that you pass these. I know that's usually how they do that. It's got to be inspiring to see all that. Not only the good vibe in here and then you thinking this is going to be good, but just to see. Okay, here's Bruce, and in Bangladesh. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
That's got to be in your head, playing a few, playing with your mind a little bit.
Another thing about that is that this was not long after the Lennon assassination, right? And his gear was in there. They recorded that last album there.
Oh, wow.
So here's John Lennon's, Mellotron, and a bunch of his equipment and this grand piano, that he played on a bunch of records, and you're working in the same room, that they were in. Ooh. I mean, later on. I was doing a session for Ronnie Spector. It was me and Marshall and a bass player named Graham Maybe, and she was recording some Marshall stuff, but we were in there. So the owner of the studio, his name is Ray Sakala. He says, I want to play you guys something. So he takes us up to the Studio C, and he has this, it's a quarter inch master tape of this song called Dream Number 9, that's John Lennon. That
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're listening to that. It's like you feel like you're on hallowed ground or something.
Ooh.
Extremely moving kinds of things. So anyway, the record plant was just being in that environment in itself was astonishing.
Oh. My gosh, yeah. I wonder how long they kept the equipment set up like that.
I don't know.
No, no one wants to touch it,
I know.
Don't move it.
Exactly. And they all knew him, he had been in there for a long time, so it wasn't like, and then John Lennon said that it was like, and John did this, and, it was like, it was different. I've met famous people, before, but anyway, nothing like that.
Yeah. Of course, you were in New York, and did you move to New York to go to school there? Is that how they initially got you to New York?
I went to New York to go to school, and I went to school, for a year at a place called the Institute of Audio Research to learn about recording, and I did get a job in a studio with working for a guy named Herb Abramson. Herb Abramson in Ahmet Ertegun started Atlantic Records, so he was Ahmet Ertegun's partner, early on. Now he had gotten drafted, and Ahmet went on to wild success. While when he came back, he did have some success. He ran that label called Atco Records. We had some singles that were on Atco, and he also produced a lot of really great R&B records. In the 1950s. This record that I really like called 1 Minute Julep by the Clovers. Anyway, a bunch of stuff. Like Big Joe Turner records. All this kind of really iconic R&B stuff. But so I worked with him for a while, but it was tough. They weren't really doing well. And so what I ended up doing is working for a rehearsal studio. And at first I thought, well, do I really want to do this, But, while I'm in there, the bands that are rehearsing are like Dr. John, Ricky Lee Jones, Cameo, Rupert Murdoch, or not Murdoch, but Rupert Holmes.
Wrong guy.
All of these guys, who had, really successful. The Dead Boys were there, right? Stiv Bators, so like real hardcore punk bands, know. But also, I don't know if you know this band or not, but they were called the Roaches, and it's three sisters. They rehearsed there. And so, the level of people that I met there was certainly, I met more people than I would have ever met, working in the recording studio, because, I had 3 rooms going all the time, and it was all, a lot of people were on major labels, and heavy hitters within the business. There was also a lot of babysitting, where it was like crazy, thrash bands that would just turn everything up all, and then smoke a bunch of weed and just go crazy, for a couple of hours, and I had to make sure they didn't break anything, But anyway, there was some really neat things in there, and then also the guys who owned that business were looking for a band to manage. and Marshall was in a play called Beatlemania
Yep.
at the time.
Yeah, he
And
played John.
He was
Okay.
a John. Yeah, I've said, well, he was a John, but that kind of implies something bad. So let's say that he was a John Lennon.
he
You know, in
portrayed
there.
John.
John Lennon impersonator, right?
There you go.
So he did that, and then when he wanted to get out of it, you know, and he wanted to do other things.
Yeah.
And so the guys who I work for, you know, they had the capital to do it. So you know, they ended up managing him and floating, you know, the project, which, you know, tons of $1982, you know, in order to, you know, to get a deal. And there was a lot of other things, you know. Marshall is a songwriter. Early on, there was a guy named Robert Gordon who was on RCA, and he had covered one of Marshall's songs, and it was he performed it on what is the name of that Canadian? It's a comedy troupe out of Chicago, Second City.
Oh, Second City.
That television show. So that was a good break, you know, for Marshall. And then early on, as a songwriter, it's like Bette Midler recorded one of his songs, and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band did, and you know, and all these other, you know, things. So I got a lot of breaks, you know, a lot of you know, nice breaks. But then we got signed to Warner Brothers, and it was like, this is, you know, and a 5-album deal, which is sort of an
That's a lot, isn't
unheard
it?
of thing. You know,
Yeah.
now, I mean, you might be able to get them. Well, whatever. You know, I don't think that they're doing that so much, you know,
Right,
anymore.
right.
So we got tour support, and you know, and we got to work with great producers, and you know, in really, really nice studios.
And people to move your equipment.
Yeah, that's right. I'll tell you, you know, I got kind of spoiled, you know, that I would just kind of walk in and all my stuff would be there.
Nice.
You know, that was nice.
That was like a whole nother level when you got, you know, signed with Warner Brothers. I mean, that had to be like pinch me. Is this happening kind of you know, thing? I would think.
Well, it was, you know, and then also, you know, especially when the first record came out. I mean, we got a 4.5 star out of 5, you know, from Rolling Stone magazine, and every music paper, you know, internationally, I mean, really gave us very nice reviews.
Yeah.
Now, there's a part of being like a critic's, you know, choice. And then there's an upside and a downside, is because once you become the critic's choice and someone wants to, you know, you're going to get knocked down off that pedestal.
Right.
But for a while, I mean, it was like everything that happened every single day. It's like, oh, we're going to go do this show. Oh, we're going to go do this, you know, this nice, you know, we're going on concert doing some shows with you know, with Joe Jackson or the Hall & Oates or whoever it was. I mean, so great things just kept on happening every day, you know.
At that point, were you thinking? I mean, you obviously were enjoying it and just, you know, living the life and just taking it all in. But did you ever stop and think, this could stop someday, or, you know, anything like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, so here's a story. I heard this interview with Michael J. Fox one time, right?
Yeah.
And he said, because apparently he drank, you know, he drank a bit for a while. And he said that he really thought like any day someone was going to come in and say, Michael, you know, you're not really deserving of this, and we're pulling the plug on you right now. And his thing was, well, at least I was going to be in the bag when they told me that, right? So I think that's what I think that's kind of what I do, you know, the route that I took, you know, as well, is that, you know, he's kind of got wilder and, you know, and wilder. And I guess, you know, in some ways you're just trying to navigate a stressful situation. And, you know, I'm 22 years old. I don't have any experience in this. I mean, it's like you don't really, when big success happens, or what's proportionally big success, you know, in your life, it's like you really don't know how to manage it, you know.
Yeah, and you're young too.
That's right. You're young and stupid, right?
Stupid.
So what do? You do young and stupid things, you know. That's
well, they say sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Absolutely, you know.
Which you talk about in the book quite a bit of, you know, you were just going down that path, you know, the drinking and the partying and, you know, the drugs that you did. And so I thought it was very, you know, first of all, to open yourself up to that, you know, and put it in writing, you know, is...
Yeah, I got to tell you, getting back
Scary,
to this thing about having my mom be the editor, right?
Yeah.
So I'm writing this story about being in the Chateau Marmont in L.A. And, like, Chateau Marmont is a pretty famous, it's like Jim Morrison, has there's stories about him,
Right,
and
right.
And that's where John Belushi died, and the guys in Led Zeppelin riding motorcycles up and down the hallway. It's just like bad
got a name.
behavior, and it
Yeah.
even goes back, farther than that to like the 1930s movie stars, and it was the first building in LA to be built to earthquake standards,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So the big shots at the movie studios would say, all right, well, if you're going to get in trouble with the Chateau Marmont, because at least it's soundproof, in there. So no one will hear you getting into trouble, right? But so I write this story about staying up, for a long time, snorting cocaine with my brother Mitchell. And my mom's reading the story, and
no.
she says, oh, well, you broke my heart, but I guess everyone made it out, okay. And, and it was 30 plus years ago. So you're not grounded or anything, but I think it was a bit.
Yes. Yeah, your mom, that's not something your mother would want to read all of a sudden, and it's just like.
Not so much, but, I just felt like I should be honest about it.
Oh, yeah.
And then also, I mean, that was pretty ubiquitous at the time, and in the music industry. It was everywhere you went. And when people wanted to be your friend, they would extend this, their hospitality by sharing, right? And so it was just, you couldn't turn around without it being there.
Right.
There's a story that I tell about Marshall going off at one of the executives or one of the people in the promotion department, saying that, so far you've just been a bunch of coked up knuckleheads, basically. This was like later on in the career. And I point out, well, first off, if you weren't a coked up knucklehead during that period of time, you were kind of the exception, and not the rule. But then, and a knucklehead isn't the word that was really used either. And I said, that is not really an enduring term. Throughout human history, it's never been an enduring term. And these are the people that you need to work with you. So was that really, anyway? But it was all around, and I just wanted to be honest about it. And people who I know who are musicians, I mean, they were right there beside me. So
Yeah, I think I remember there was a picture in here, like a hidden camera picture from Warner Brothers. I was like, who took that picture?
Well,
or shouldn't you say?
No, it's not. It was I put that there in jest.
Okay. Well, I was curious. I was just curious.
Right.
For those that I don't know what I'm talking about, it's like the camera's like kind of looking up real close to the bottom of the table, and there's someone rolling a dollar bill, and you got little strips of white on the table. I was like, this can't be real, but all right.
The other thing that I talk about in that is that here's this kind of benign thing, the cocoa leaf, right?
Yeah.
And people who work in the mountains, they would chew the leaf and everything was good, and then somebody got the idea of, okay, well, let's boil these babies down, make them 10,000 more times more important than they would normally be. It's like, who thinks of this stuff?
Who thinks of it as right. I want you to share the story about you getting thrown off the roof. What the heck?
Oh, okay.
I was one of those. I just started laughing out loud. I was like, what the heck? Oh my gosh.
So this was it might have been my 22nd birthday, or no, it's probably before that, because let's just go back a little bit.
Okay.
When I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school and 17 years old, I joined the Musicians Union and played in a band that played 5 nights a week, 5 and 6 sets a night every week, and we played one place for 50 weeks in a row.
Wow.
So everybody who goes there, and the whole bit, right? So these guys, I mean, I could have been 19, or could have been 18 even, So I was young. But these guys got the idea that after this night, they were going to take me and put me underneath the beer tappers, and drench me or waterboard me, basically is what they wanted to do. So I wasn't so hot about that idea. So I thought, well, God, what can I do, So I climbed up on the roof of the bar, and there was a vent stack, where I could kind of, cuddle up in a fetal position, and hide. And I just hope that those guys, that their attention span wasn't long enough, that they would remember. Mm-hmm. So I stayed up there, and they came out, and then they went in, and I thought, phew, that was close, Then then they came back out. and this big guy named Ralph, I don't know how big he was,
Big.
like let's say that he was 6'10", right? So he climbs up there. And he sees me, and I'm not. There's no place to run, up on this roof. And he picks me up by the collar of the shirt and by the belt loops, of my pants, and throws me off the roof into these guys who are waiting, for to waterboard me. Well, I'm trying to fight them, but there's a bunch of them, and when we get to the door, I'm kind of twisting, and I smack my head against the door jamb of the door, and it's like a head cut up on my, above my temple area, right? So I'm like bleeding, it's just gushing blood. These guys don't care a bit, they got their agenda, and that's what they're gonna do. So they finally, they do. They put me under the taps and completely drench me. Well,
the alcohol was probably good for the cut. And probably
yeah. But that must have happened after I had gone to school. Because I went to school and then I came back for like about a year, and when that happened, I said to myself, I got to go back. I got to be someplace safe. I got to go back to Manhattan. Because I think that happened in Fraser or someplace.
Okay. You never. It could happen anywhere. Right?
That's right. It could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere. How about we hear another song?
Sure.
If you have one ready.
I do.
Okay.
I can have one really ready very quickly. Okay, so this would be like the second single off that same album, and it's called Marianne. Let me fire this baby up.
Another good one.
Well,
good drumming again.
Hey, thanks.
Robert Crenshaw with us here, and talking about his new book. And I mentioned earlier, you kind of give an access to people that don't know the music business and how it works and everything. But you also give us access to the movie scene because you guys were involved with that as well. Of course, Marshall played Buddy Holly in the La Bamba movie, and I remember that was a great movie, and I remember that. It just, what year did that come out? 80-something?
86, I think.
Okay.
And, for me, the nice things about that were that the opening for the movie was at the I can't think of what it's called, but it's the something Chinese theater, and on Hollywood Boulevard,
right,
you know,
with the stars
in Hollywood, right? And we stayed at the Roosevelt Hotel, which is like very kind of iconic, you know, pieces of like, Cary Grant and Humphrey Bogart and all these guys, you know, smoking cigarettes and stuff, you know, in the bar, and really, really nice. But then the other part of it was when we played the party for it. It was a live MTV, concert, and it was us, the Stray Cats, Brian Setzer. I can't remember if it was just him or if it was actually the Stray Cats. We did a lot of shows with Brian Setzer and the Stray Cats, kind of back in the day. And then also Los Lobos. We did they were obviously on the bill because they contributed the most music. But it was really fun. I mean, I met David Weiss. Was there for some reason? Guy from Was Not Was. Don Was's partner. Yeah, and anyway, that theater itself, it's the Palace, in Los Angeles. I wrote a fair amount about that place because it not only was that event there, but it's like in historical context, like the Nixon checkers speech was given, there, and then also Lucille Ball's first television show, and also Jerry Lewis's television show is out there. Anyway, so a big deal, and then also the movie premiere, just a big gigantic party,
That's
really
so much
big
fun. It sounds like so much fun, But let's back up a minute because, of course, Marshall, your brother Marshall Crenshaw was, played Buddy Holly, but then you guys were actually on the Peggy Sue Got.
That's right. There's a scene, and
Peggy Sue Got Married. Is that the name?
That's
of it?
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The thing about Peggy Sue Got Married that is important is, first off, it's a Francis Ford Coppola movie. So we got to meet Francis, and we're thinking to ourselves, that's the guy who did Apocalypse Now. That's the guy who did The Godfather.
Were you
that's
starstruck? Is what you're saying?
Totally starstruck. Now the other people who were in the movie was Nicolas Cage, and
Kathleen
Turner. And Jim Carrey, right? But Jim Carrey and Nicolas Cage weren't famous yet. It was the first movie that he was Nicolas Cage as opposed to Nicholas Coppola, which is what his real name is, and he's of course Francis's, nephew. Yeah. But
good to know people.
Yeah. But hanging out on a movie set, was really, really fabulous. Mostly the hanging out part, a lot of waiting in the film industry. But we had a trailer, and we're hanging out in a trailer, and people would come and visit. Actually, Jim Carrey used to come and visit us every single day. And this other actress named Lisa Jane Persky, who I really, really like, who has the Detroit connection. But I was in the trailer one day, we're hanging out, and who sticks his head in there and wants us to meet us, but is Robin Williams, and because he I guess he had spent some time in the Detroit area, and we walked around and waxed nostalgic about Detroit for a little while. Anyway, it was like one of those things that lasted like 10 minutes tops or 15 minutes tops.
10 minutes
but it was
with
like
Robert Williams. Come on,
super, just super nice. He was very, very nice guy. It was cool.
But it's cool that you were actually in the movie too, which is
that's right.
Fun.
And I will say that I didn't realize that we were going to go through the Screen Actors Guild and all this sort of stuff. So some time passed, and I get this envelope in the mail because we had all been paid to do it, and I just figured that was that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've gotten a check every quarter for 35 years.
Gotta love those royalties.
So it's like I didn't expect that. So that's another thing. I mean, once in a while, just a little bit of money falls from the sky. It's like you think, oh wow, that really did happen.
That's cool, and I love it when you mentioned Nicholas and Francis Ford Coppola. You've got pictures with them. In this book, which is kind of cool too. So,
also, I met one of the guys who was on set was this guy Don Stark, and Don Stark was on the '70s show for a really long time.
Yeah. Oh, the dad.
For all the seasons, playing something Pizziat, the neighbor with the funny, curly hair.
Oh, okay.
Right. But he was on that show for a long time, and then also, I mean, Helen Hunt, Sofia Coppola. I have a list that I put together for the book of the people, but I mean, it's really kind of amazing how many people went on to have gigantic success, you know, out of that movie. Just amazing.
That's cool that you were part of that. You know,
Yeah,
not
astonishing.
to mention the royalty checks that keep popping in every so often. Well, let's talk about you know, you're with your brother Marshall, and also you've done how many albums with Marshall? Did you do 4?
I did 4.
Okay, so.
Okay, I was just going to say I did 4, and then before he was signed to Warner Brothers, I did a record with him before that also as well.
Well, you know, even though you're brothers, you know, things kind of change.
Right.
So, you know, then there was a point when, you know, as Marshall put it, cut the cord.
Right.
You know, which, as you explained in the book, you know, was pretty devastating for you. And so, you know, I mean, you obviously crushed. I mean, I would be too.
Uh-huh.
You know, all of a sudden you're not part of this great thing that you've been experiencing all these years, and then, you know, now what, right? Did you have that feeling? Oh, now what?
Well,
am
you
I
know,
gonna do?
that's an interesting way to put it, because I think about it now, and it's really, I didn't know what to do with myself, you know, because I really had, you know, I had been doing this thing for a long time, and it's really, you know, it's like it was like the only life you know kind of thing. But so I really didn't know what to do with myself, and it took me a long time to kind of reinvent a version of myself that I could be, you know, that I was proud of, and and liked. So, and it did. It took me like, you know, a decade to kind of get over the hurt
That
of
long?
it. You know,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it did. I was really, you know, devastated, because there was also a lot of you know, family dynamics, you know, involved in it.
Yeah, you're going to still see the guy every, you know, because he's family,
That's right.
your brother.
Thanksgiving, who is this bum? You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. It's like kind of like going through a divorce, I suppose. You know. And thankfully, I've never been divorced, but you know, something like that. Just a big life
Yes,
change.
yeah.
So you just kind of have to go through the process. Is really
Is that
what it
when you
is.
decided, well, I can do this on my own, I should make some music myself? Is that at that point, or how long after that?
Well, you know, I mean, it wasn't. You know, I couldn't not make music or not make records, even if I wanted to. I mean, I had been doing
your
that.
blood.
Even when I was a little kid, you know, we had a Sony reel-to-reel with sound on sound, and you know, we could make these recordings. So I mean, it was just that part of it. I guess that was kind of a cathartic kind of, you know, exercise for me to do. I didn't get back into it right away, but once I did, it really kind of helped me get back to my musical community, you know, that I had, the friends that I had. And then also, I mean, you know, as far as like playing with Marshall would always play on my records. All I had to do was ask him. I mean, you know, he would come, you know, I mean, no problem. And, you know, there were tons of, you know, really super talented people that I could pull in, you know, into this pool of, into my talent pool, right? So, you know, it kind of all worked out, and and as I mentioned, I mean, most people don't have these stories, I don't think.
Right.
So,
Oh, no, they don't. So you ended up with 3 albums out, correct? Am I correct?
4 albums,
Oh, I'm sorry.
actually.
Okay,
yeah,
4
albums. 3 of them were on this independent label called Gadfly,
Gadfly, yeah.
and then the last 1.5 I put out myself.
Okay. And I love the band you've put together.
Oh yeah.
You had some good names in there, and people that you knew, right?
That's right.
This is from
That's
the talent
right.
pool, as you just mentioned. So, you know, pull in the people that you think will, you know, help you make this a success.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. And you know, plus, you know, a lot of those people were my good friends. So
Yeah.
I mean, you know, whenever you're surrounded by your good friends, you know, that's always a good thing.
More laughs and good stories. In you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I love the and I'm not sure if this is the band that played on all of your records, but the 4 guys you had together, and you what'd you call them? Hanging
Hanging Chads.
Hanging Chads.
Yeah. Well, the Hanging Chads, we did some stuff, and it was Don Dixon, who's a pretty famous record producer. This guy Bill Lloyd, who was in a band in the '90s called Foster and Lloyd. They were signed to to RCA, and they had a bunch of country hits, big hits, you know. Plus, he was a really successful, you know, songwriter. And then a guy named Jamie Hoover, who played with like Hootie and the Blowfish, and he plays with a whole bunch of people. And he's another super talented guy. So, you know, we figured that the 4 of us, if we got together, you know, we could probably draw a larger audience than just, you know, one of us individually, So we
Smart
did
thinking there.
Yeah, so we did a tour together. But I also worked with a lot of really great people in
Okay.
Detroit. Stuart Simon and Gary Sussman and Aaron Vaughn and all these guys. So
You are well connected in the music business.
yeah, thankfully.
Yes,
thankfully,
yeah.
I hadn't burned any bridges. So that was good.
Well, good thing. You just
Yeah.
never know down the line. So, all right. Looks like you want to play another song.
Well, I was thinking, I don't know if I have time to do this. I would like to play another song, but later on I'd like to play a little bit from the book also, if you don't mind, 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. Why don't we? Whichever one you want to do.
Okay, let's go for a song first because I have a story about this.
Okay.
This is recorded at the power station in New York. When we were downstairs, David Bowie was upstairs doing the Let's Dance album with Nile Rodgers. Well, I never really crossed paths with them so much, but I used to go up there and steal their beer. So just anyway.
And that story's in this book too.
This is
good
for the
story.
first single off of that record.
Okay.
Well, I hate to pull the plug on it, but I got to tell you something. That's the demo, the original demo of the song, and I tried to grab the file that was the actual release, that came out.
Right.
But that record, that little recording right there, was made in Marshall's apartment.
Really?
With like one microphone, kind of thing. So I think what I'll do instead is I'll play. This is a little 2.5 minute sample of my audiobook,
Okay,
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And this story is a true story, and it goes out to all my friends in Berkeley, because it's something that happened at Berkeley High School, and that I was a participant in, for better or worse.
Uh-oh. Could be trouble.
Oh, I turned the volume down. Crap.
Okay. We're talking with Robert Crenshaw here on Behind the Mic, and he's going to play a little clip from the audio, which I think you sent this to me. I think this is when I heard.
Did
Yeah.
Some of you readers may have gone to my high school. For those of you who didn't, our football team was called the Berkeley Bears. Some of you may recall the day the bear got pushed off of Berkeley High School roof. For those of you who don't, the bear was a 6-foot plus fiberglass and resin sculpture that probably weighed about 120 pounds. The bear stood on its hind legs and didn't look so fierce as it did faux regal with its aquanet fiberglass sculpted hair and its Pepsodent smile. I recently found out that the bear came from Bald Mountain Riding Stables and was used for signage, perhaps warning you that your lunch may be stolen by a scavenger lummox if left in the car while riding. Coincidentally, it was lunchtime and me and hundreds of other kids were hanging around outside in the courtyard of the school. I was no doubt smoking a bum-cool cigarette when I began a conversation with my friends John and Paul. We began talking about what it might look like to see that bear fall 3 stories to its death from the roof of the school's library. I wondered if it would shatter into a million pieces or just hit the ground with one mighty thump. We even discussed the possibility of it bouncing a few times, like an animal writhing in the last throes of life, till stilled by the exhaustion of kinetic energy. It wasn't too long into the conversation before John and Paul decided to perform the experiment. I was a bit surprised, but John got that can't keep a good man down, this is science look in his eye, and Paul with his stoic generosity would always help out a friend. So off they went. As I was standing on the ground, wondering if they were really going to do it, I saw someone with a camera and told them that they might want to keep it ready. I began to think to myself, this is going to look great in the yearbook, maybe even make the inside cover. My level of naivety at the time could only be equal to my more general ignorance of human behavior, but still, I would love to know what happened to that picture, because one was taken. Moments later, Chaos enveloped the courtyard as the mighty bear began its descent. So that's the production track, that I took with it. I really trying to make it like very theatrical
Yes.
and like
Yes.
in like a show.
So yeah, the audiobook has a lot of music, which obviously is not in a book. So
That's
makes
right.
it, yeah, definitely would be a.
It's kind of
great
like
thing.
this. The book has pictures. The audiobook doesn't have pictures.
True.
So the audiobook has a lot of music in it
Mm-hmm.
and sound effects and cartoon kind of like. So really, I think you got to get both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people like audio. Some people just want to sit down with a book and
Yeah.
and enjoy it that way. So
I've got. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have gotten so many nice letters, from people who have, read
nice.
the book and, said that it had really struck a chord, with them, and that they identified with the, with the stories and stuff. So it's really been a nice, kind of shared human experience, thing.
Well, yeah, and as I said, you can really, music nerds, music aficionados, everybody, it's got a little bit of everything for everybody. So it's really good. So we're running out of time, but I want to ask you just a couple quick questions. Got to do the Pam exam here. So
Okay.
Best advice you were ever given?
Learn to shut up. Never miss a good opportunity to shut up. That's the way that it really goes.
And in those when you're working with record labels and all those things, sometimes
right.
that probably came in handy.
I've
many
missed that
times.
opportunity a few times,
All right, this is a fill in the blank, and you can't say. Well, I'm not going to say that. I'm really good at blank. I'm really bad at blank.
I'm really good at driving the car. I'm really bad at driving the car. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words.
Well,
right?
that makes okay. Well, I want to bring up that because you have some interesting, hilarious car ride stories in here. Again,
Oh,
my
man.
goodness! Well, you guys. Give us a sampling of one
Just
of the car
in
rides.
30 seconds,
Okay.
is that the guys that we used to drive with, we always, when we weren't in buses, we used to get two Lincoln Town Cars. And the guys who were in there, they kind of like, I say that they could drive like Clyde Barrow because, they were, from Bonnie and Clyde because they were just crazy. But they we'd get on the expressway, they'd push the accelerator to the floor, and that is how fast we would drive all day. So at first you're scared to death, but after a while you actually get used to it. But it was like, I think about this game called Defender. It's like a video game, and you can go into hyperspace,
Yeah.
and that's what we would do is just go into hyperspace. But people probably looked and just thought that their radar must be broken.
What, was that a car?
Exactly.
Well, you probably got used to the fact we were always on time. All right, this is a good one since you've been in the music business for so long and you've seen the back scene of so many different things. The biggest obstacle in the music industry today is?
The biggest obstacle in the music, digital technology. I guess it's a
double-sided sword, yes.
edged thing,
Yes.
Because in some ways it's really helped things, but in other ways it's really destroyed business models, that were kind of reliable for a long time.
Yeah. That has changed. Definitely has changed the way music is done today and everything. Do you think? When you guys, all these albums were doing fantastic and, whatever, do you think that would have been the same if it was in today's world with the digital?
No, absolutely not, because because people used to have to buy music, and now I can go on YouTube and listen to almost any song, or I can go to any one of those streaming services.
Right.
And I don't mean to be negative, but I mean those streaming services. You have to stream a lot of songs in order to actually get paid a decent amount of money. So but I know people still sell a lot of records at concerts, anyway, yeah.
All right, one last question. Craziest fan experience?
Craziest fan experience? Well, I met people who were starstruck, when they were talking to me, and I just found that so, almost uncomfortable.
Okay.
So that would be it. But I mean, it wasn't like anybody, took their clothes off or anything like that. Just yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I lose the game.
No, you did great. Well, it's a great book. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and like I said, it's for you get a backside or back access.
Backstage access. It's a backstage
Well,
pass,
you're a
you know?
driver. You always had Marshall's backside to look at. So
Right. I heard the back of the amplifiers and I saw everyone's backs.
yeah, there you go. The thing about a drummer, they always see the rear. Brand new book from our guest here today, Robert Crenshaw. It's called My Mythological Narrative, a Rock Odyssey. Some great stuff. Where is this available?
On Amazon and any place that, any one of those digital places where you can buy books. iTunes,
no more Borders,
Borders, any place that you can buy books, it's pretty much available.
All right, and the best place to find you if people want to find out where you're at and what you're up to is you have a website, right?
Well, you know what? I would go for Facebook.
Okay.
If you look up, my name, or if you just search my name, you'll probably find out what's going on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. It's been a pleasure, and I really enjoyed reading your book. It was some fun stuff in here, and so,
well, thank you, Pam. This was really a pleasure and big fun. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So. And thanks to all of you out there watching in video land, digital land. Thanks for tuning in. Do appreciate that. Here from behind the mic in our beautiful Music Town studios on the second floor of Hockey Town, downtown Detroit. And until next week, I'm Pam Rossi. Have a great week.